on the phone from the Nation magazine, Ari Berman, who tells me that he's. Are you on the lam? What? I don't understand. What's going on? You running?
I may be one of those. Soon be one of those felons, Sam, who can't vote because I moved and I went to my old apartment and I saw that I had a jury duty summons for July 16th, which obviously has passed. So, do you have any legal advice you can give me pro bono?
Yeah, I would leave the country as soon as possible before they put an APB out on you. That's what I would do. I mean, that would be the first thing I would do. No, I would call them.
What I was going to do is I was going to see if the new Black Panther Party could bail me out.
Right. I mean, let me contact my peeps in the reconstituted Acorn. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the reconstituted Acorn could fake my identity and get me out of jury duty.
Right. We know that Acorn, the reconstituted Acorn, is basically on the fringes of just about 10 miles outside of the outer boroughs of New York City, just waiting for me to give the signal, and then they descend upon the city.
It's a sleeper cell. It's a sleeper cell waiting to steal the election for Obama again.
I think if you call them and you tell them what happened, they'll be okay with it. But you're going to have to serve, Ari. I mean,
I know. Well, I'm prepared to serve, Sam.
I got news for you. You're not going to get selected.
I know. I mean, I would like to get selected, but all these radical beliefs we share may disqualify me.
Right. I never got selected in New York City. I did get selected up in Hudson.
Yeah. Well, in Hudson,
upstate.
Anything goes.
Right.
Yeah, anything goes in Hudson.
I did a DWI up in Hudson, a case, but down in New York.
It wasn't your DWI.
No, I sat on the jury.
Oh yeah.
But I did I practiced coming in drunk.
You did. You didn't have a strong ideological opinion on drinking as opposed to other subjects.
They didn't ask me any questions that would. I mean, no, I didn't. I mean,
What did they ask you in New York that disqualified you?
What do you do?
Yeah.
That took me out of the race.
Well, how did you? That must have been a long answer. I mean, what did you even tell them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, who knows at the time? I think it was probably video games and a couple other things. But, I mean, as soon as you say I'm a writer for the Nation magazine, the prosecutor's going to go like, okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your he'll ask you a question or two she will ask you a question or two to be friendly about it. Like, how's that? Oh, that sounds like fun. All right, well, thank you. And then because he's got to seem friendly. Because, he still has the other jurors there that he's got to appeal to. But
yeah.
You're done. So, the best time to serve is actually August.
Yeah.
Because
it's already August 20th. So.
Right. No, you're in trouble. But speaking of in trouble, we know that if you do become convicted as a felon and you serve your time in many states around the country, essentially by the fiat of the governor, that happened in Florida, you will not be able to vote.
Yeah.
Will you explain
Florida and Iowa are the two states since the 2010 election that have, by executive order, changed their laws to prevent ex-felons from voting.
Now, I want to, this audience is pretty up to date on what's going on with a lot of this, but I want to broaden out, and then I want to talk about Pennsylvania and Ohio in particular. But will you please explain to people, there is no constitutional right to vote in this country, is there?
No, I mean, it's a little bit complicated in that there have been a lot of different amendments passed to the Constitution that deal with the right to vote, but there is no explicit guarantee to the right to vote in the U.S. Constitution, and that is a problem because when you have the U.S. Supreme Court, for example, saying to states you can pass voter ID laws even if you present no evidence of voter fraud, that would be somehow stopped by a voter ID law, that sets a very bad precedent. And so we're seeing that.
And what case was that? What case was that? Judge Stevens.
That was the Crawford versus Marion, Indiana case relating to a voter ID law passed in Indiana in 2005 and upheld by the Supreme Court in 2008. And what the plaintiffs who challenged that law in Indiana said is they said that people would be disenfranchised by the law, and the law was unnecessary because there was no evidence of voter fraud in Indiana to justify the law. And Indiana said, yes, there is no voter fraud in the state, but we can still pass this law. And the Supreme Court basically signed off on that. And so that sets a very bad precedent for challenging voter ID laws in many, many states.
It's very difficult. And indeed, we had a big ruling in Pennsylvania. Tell us about that ruling. First off, and if it was a surprise. I was surprised by it.
I was surprised by it. I mean, there's kind of two different ways that judges can go about ruling on these cases. I mean, if you look at states like Wisconsin and Missouri, judges there did block voter ID laws in those two states because they said they violated the right to vote provision in the state constitution. The Pennsylvania Constitution is very similar to the Missouri Constitution, so there was many grounds on which it seemed like the judge could have at least enjoined the law. Instead of looking at the state constitution, the judge seemed to look to the U.S. Supreme Court instead for his guidance. And I think that was a decision the judge made that he didn't necessarily have to do. But once he looked to the U.S. Supreme Court, it was pretty clear he was going to uphold the law based on the existing precedent. I think it was a bad ruling. I think the judge made a lot of assumptions about the state that are incorrect. He said that the law was going to be implemented in a nonpartisan, even-handed manner, which is absolutely shocking when you have Pennsylvania Republicans saying the purpose of the law is to elect Mitt Romney, when you have Pennsylvania Republicans overwhelmingly passing this law over Democratic objections, when you have a situation where Pennsylvania has only provided money for a tenth of the IDs needed in the state. I mean, they've only allocated money for 75,000 IDs, even though, according to the Department of Transportation, 750,000 voters don't have voter ID. So, I mean, the state's totally unprepared to implement the law. It's incredibly partisan. It's not well thought out, and it's not needed. But the judge said, let's just forget all that. The state can do what it wants.
Now, from there, it goes to the state Supreme Court. Is that right?
Yeah, now it goes to the state Supreme Court.
And is the argument the same, or will there be a different tact in terms of, like, for instance, it seems to me that there is an opportunity here to claim that, okay, the legislature has the right to pass this law. The law does not inhibit the right under the Constitution of Pennsylvania to provide a vote. But couldn't they also say, like, well, we want to enjoin it just because they are not able to execute this law in time? In other words,
I think that you could just argue it on a practical level. It's interesting if you look at what the judge said in Pennsylvania, and this was another puzzling assertion. He said that it would be more difficult for Pennsylvania to abandon the law than to go ahead and implement it.
That's
absurd. Shocking to me. That's absurd, because Pennsylvania's never had a voter ID law. So if they abandoned this law, they would run the election like every other election in Pennsylvania, the 2010 election, the 2008 election, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, none of which were questioned for their legitimacy. Now they have to implement this.
How did that judge justify that statement? I mean, under what?
He justified the statement by essentially quoting testimony from an official for the state of Pennsylvania who said that it would be difficult for them to suspend the law right now because they already sent materials out to election officials. But that's just such an absurd. It's such an absurd allegation because, like I said, Pennsylvania is totally unprepared to implement this law. They have only printed a tenth of the IDs needed. You look at the DMVs in Pennsylvania. 9 counties don't even have a DMV office in Pennsylvania. In 13 other counties, the office is open 1 day a week. We're talking about 758,000 voters, according to the Department of Transportation, registered voters who don't have correct voter ID. Now they have to all get IDs, every single one of them, in the span of 2.5 months from a state that is completely unprepared to implement the law. So you're telling me it's easier to keep that law on the books than to run the election like it was run in every other election? I mean, it was really an absurd and puzzling statement, and from a judge that had a relatively fair-minded reception. I mean, it really just seemed like he was reciting right-wing talking points when it came to this ruling.
Now, not to get crass here, but to try and determine how much impact this is going to have, when you talk about those 9 counties that don't have a DMV, when you talk about those other counties which the DMV is open once a week or whatever it is. Where are these counties located? what are the what's the partisan index there? I'm just curious as to.
Yeah.
I mean, because I would imagine, like, look, you've got 750,000 people who are ostensibly caught in this sort of web of people who have either expired ID driver's licenses or IDs that don't have an issuance date or an expiration date, like college students.
Yeah.
You've got 43 or 48% of the people in Philadelphia that don't have this. So this comes down to how many of those old people in the rural areas that are Republican strongholds will be disenfranchised relative to, urban centers where you have a higher African American population or higher student population. Give me a sense. I mean, do you have a sense of that?
I have a little bit of a sense of it. I mean, I'll honestly have a better sense of it next month because I'm going to Pennsylvania to do more reporting.
Right, and when you're in prison, you'll also have a lot of time to think about that. All right.
Yeah, exactly, and I'll have a lot of time to make calls from prison. So just to answer the first part of the question, 9% of registered voters, according to the state of Pennsylvania, don't have the correct voter ID. But that number is 18% in Philadelphia, which is a city that is 44% African American. So I think we can reasonably infer from that data that a lot of the problem is in Philadelphia among African American voters. And I think there is now a voter ID coalition dedicated to trying to get people IDs, even though that should be the role of the state, but the state has been completely incompetent in implementing this law. Or maybe they haven't been incompetent. Maybe the point of the law is to not actually get people IDs, to make it harder for them to vote, which is what I suspect. But in any case, that voter ID coalition has been focused on Philadelphia. And I was on a panel with Heather Smith, the president of Rock the Vote, and she told a story. She was in talking to high school seniors in inner city Philadelphia, and she asked them, how many of you have a driver's license or a state-issued Pennsylvania ID? And she said one person in the class raised their hand.
Wow.
Now, granted, that is an anecdotal story, but I think it's fair to assume that there's a major problem in Philadelphia making sure everyone has the IDs. That said,
now hold on. Let me just make one point here, that the way Democratic candidates, not just President Obama, but Democratic candidates win Pennsylvania is usually by winning so big in the urban
Philly.
centers, in Philly in particular, that it overcomes the deficit for the rest of the state.
And you don't think that the Pennsylvania Republicans knew that when they passed this law? I mean, the whole point of passing this law is to suppress the Democratic vote in Philly. That is the entire goal. That said, I'm not totally sure that Republicans have completely thought this through, because there was just a new study out, and it found that if you look at the 13 southeastern counties in Pennsylvania, and this...
The cops have already come and got you. Are you there? All right, we'll be right back. Sorry, Ari, we lost you for a second.
So I was just going to say...
They haven't thought this through.
Well, I think there's a chance that a number of Republican-leaning seniors could be disenfranchised by this law, because there is a new story out in the morning call that says that in the Lehigh Valley, seniors are 21% of registered voters, but 33% of them don't have state-issued photo ID. Now, you can vote in Pennsylvania at an exception so that you can vote with a senior, a nursing home ID, if that's the case. But I do think that there's a decent chance that there could be a lot of senior citizens who also could be disenfranchised with this law, as well as younger voters and minority voters. But I do think that the law is structured in such a way that it's going to disproportionately affect African-American voters in particular in
Right.
Philadelphia.
I mean, they knew this. I mean, they knew, like, okay, we'll have some of our voters will be disenfranchised, but, we're going to have more of theirs, and that's the way that we do this, right? I mean, that's the game. Now, in Ohio, I'll tell you something. The idea that we even be talking about Ohio at this point, I mean, how many elections do we have to go through this BS? This is just unbelievable. It's just
Ohio and Florida. I mean, Ohio and Florida, it's amazing that we are talking about making it harder to vote in both of these states, given what happened in Florida in 2000 and what happened in Ohio in 2004. And, I mean, it's the same kind of things. I mean, it was the same kind of thing in Florida with voter purges and people wrongly being told they were felons and not being able to vote. You fast forward again in Florida, there's another major inaccurate voter purge underway. Felons can't vote once again. You look at Ohio. Ohio had extremely long lines in 2004. Early voting emerged as a bipartisan reform in Ohio to make it easier to vote and avoid those long lines, particularly in the most populous urban areas. That worked very well in 2008, too well for the Democrats because the Republicans said, no, we don't want this same amount of early voting anywhere because it's going to benefit Democratic candidates and President Obama, particularly in the most populous urban areas that are heavily African American and also have a lot of young people. And so Ohio has drastically cut back early voting for no other reason than it was something that Democrats used effectively in 2008.
What is it going to take? I mean, what is it going to take at what point do the Democrats, I mean, I guess it's never going to happen, right? The Democrats are never going to get into office and say, we need to have some type of universal right to vote. They had the Help of America Vote Act, accounting, whatever it was, HVA, I don't know what it was, the HAVA Act. And it seems to me that like their attitude is demographically we'll overcome this. We don't want to expend any political capital on this. But, I mean, how much political capital would it take to secure the vote? I just don't understand.
Well, I mean, I think the attitudes on this are changing because I think that Democrats increasingly realize that they can't take the right to vote for granted and that they have to be as aggressive in expanding the right to vote as Republicans are at trying to block it right now. And so I do think there is a changing perspective on this. There was a piece of legislation introduced in the House by House Democrats called the Voter Empowerment Act that I thought was a very good piece of legislation. I think where there are Democratic legislatures and where there are Democratic governors now, they absolutely have to make it easier for people to vote. That's really the only long-term way to combat these laws because right now it's true that Democrats are in a totally defensive position. They're in a better defensive position now than they were a year ago. That's absolutely true. There's been a lot more public attention. A lot more of these laws have been blocked. In places like Ohio, there's been an incredible amount of pushback to what the Republicans are doing that just didn't happen a year ago. So, I mean, I think there are some signs of progress, but I also think that you have to look broader. You have to look, for example, at the courts. We've talked about this before, Sam. It's incredibly important to get progressive judges on the local courts, on the federal courts, and on the Supreme Court so they don't issue these type of rulings that we saw in Pennsylvania or even that we saw from the Supreme Court in 2008. And so I think progressives need to think about this in many different ways, not just from a legislative perspective, but also from an executive perspective and a judicial perspective in terms of expanding the right to vote.
Well, I mean, if President Obama wins this election, he's got to come out. I mean, he's got to sort of expend the capital that he has, that he's not running for election again. And I mean,
it's amazing that he hasn't. It's amazing that Obama hasn't expended any political capital when he's been in office to try to get judges on the courts. I mean, that's one of the most lasting things that he could do. That's one of the most lasting things any president can do, and as we just saw in a recent New York Times article, they've completely dropped the ball on this. So I certainly do hope that this is something that the president does in a second term, but you just have to wonder, why is he waiting for a second term to do this? I mean, there's not really much he has to risk by trying to get his judges on the court. It's not like the American people would be outraged that he's trying to appoint his judges. I think quite the opposite, that people are outraged at the basic functions of the government, which includes appointing judges, just isn't happening right now.
Bill Ayers told him to wait. That's why he's doing it. Bill Ayers and Acorn told him to wait.
Obviously, I mean, that's who he takes his marching orders from.
Course,
I mean, he has since 1975.
We know that, of course. I mean, that was part of the whole. That was whole part of the Manchurian thing. You don't start the whole full socialist takeover until the second term. Everybody knows that, Ari.
He'll have more flexibility then. That's what he told Medvedev. So.
Right. Yes, we know. That's when we're going to become a client state of the Soviet Union.
Yeah,
So,
that's when the socialist takeover begins.
Well, hopefully they'll do something about it. Because there's obviously two issues here. One is that to spend resources on making sure that people can vote undercuts the ability to elect good people to office. And then the other thing is that theoretically we live in a democracy, and this is probably even more important, aside from any type of partisan concerns, we shouldn't be actively disenfranchising people.
No, I mean, you look at a situation like Ohio. You look at a situation like Ohio, where Democratic commissioners in Montgomery County, Ohio, which includes Dayton, they voted for early voting. They were told by the Ohio Secretary of State, rescind your vote or you will be suspended. They refused to rescind their votes, and they were suspended from the Board of Elections for advocating early voting. Not a socialist takeover of the country, Sam. Early voting. I mean, it's unbelievable what it's come down to, that we're actually arguing about early voting. Sometimes I just can't even believe the things that I've been covering for a year. It's so stupid and idiotic that we're having these fights in the year 2012. But I mean, there's nothing else you can do but just follow them and be in a defensive posture and try to roll back, to try to stop this incredible rollback.
Tell me about stupid and pathetic. We're going to say goodbye to you now, and we're going to talk to Amanda Marcotte about this whole concept of different tiers of rape and who should be allowed to have an abortion, because if they've been raped enough.
It's really great the level of sophistication in American politics these days, particularly from our conservative friends.
Well, see if when they send you to jail for your scofflying over the jury, see if you can get extraordinarily rendered to a different country, and then let me know how it works out there.
Sure. Yeah, I will. I'll send you a postcard from Grenada.
All right, I appreciate it. Ari Berman, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much, Ari.